Planning Commission. This meeting is being streamed live on the City of Charlotte's Planning, Design and Development's YouTube page. The public may watch it via that avenue. We will go through introductions now, starting with our commissioners from my left.
Terry Lansdale, Planning Commission.
Shauna Neely, Planning Commission.
Clayton Seeley, Planning Commission.
Andrew Blumenthal, Planning Committee.
And my name is Kiba Samuel. I serve as Chair of the Planning Committee. We will introduce staff members from my right, please.
Alicia Osborne, Division Manager, Planning.
Zania Duhaney, Planning Staff.
Kathy Cornett, planning staff.
Alberto Gonzalez, planning staff.
Gretchen Flores, Planning Staff.
Thank you all. If our commissioners have had an opportunity to review the meeting minutes from our September 20th meeting, I will accept a motion or any proposed edits.
Motion to approve.
Seconded.
Motion by Blumenthal, seconded by Seeley. All in favor, raise your hand. Any opposed? None. That passed unanimous. Thank you. Before us, we have 12, I think, 12 mandatory referrals. Are there any that our commissioners would like to pull for discussion or have inquiries? Hearing none, let's do these in one fell swoop. There it is.
At their October 18th meeting, the Planning Committee reviewed the following mandatory referrals.
It's on the,
Oh. Reviewed mandatory referral reports, 22-40, 22-41, 22-42, 22-43, 22-44, 22-45, 22-46, 22-47, 22-48, 22-49, and 22-50, and have no additional comments for the submitting agencies.
motion by Blumenthal,
Second.
second by Lansdale. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Or raise hands, I'm sorry. Any opposed? Passes unanimous. Thank you. Jumping right into item number 15.
Well, I guess one quick question on the
14.
mandatory referrals for CMS. Do those go through the same upset bid process as any other property would? It's not one specific mandatory referral, just kind of a blanket question.
We can circle back. to
Yeah, we can come back. I'm just curious if it goes through that same bid process or if that was something that they've already kind of come to terms on something and then it comes before us. Okay, that'd be great. Thanks.
Okay, and we have our planning team member, Catherine Mahoney, who will update us on the community engagement process for community area planning. Take it away.
Thank you all for the floor. I am Catherine Mahoney. I was with you all last month, and we're going to spend this evening's time reviewing what I shared last month, since this is a new project, just kind of getting all of us getting familiar with the information a little bit more, but then spending most of our time reviewing our communication and engagement strategies, and then opening the floor for any tactics or partnerships that you guys think we should explore through this project. So as a reminder, the community area planning process is the second step and implementing the vision of the comprehensive plan. The plan was adopted in June of 21. And then our first step was to translate the plan's place-based policies. So those policies that provide direction for growth and development into or onto two specific geographies as shown on the policy map. And then our partners across the hall were also working on the Unified Development Ordinance, which was adopted in August. So from our side, our next step to advancing the vision is to undertake these community area plans, and our partners working with the Unified Development Ordinance will be advancing alignment rezonings. Those rezonings will look at the place type designations on the policy map and make or recommend zoning changes where needed so that the policy and regulation are aligned and development occurs as we hope for. So community area planning and alignment rezoning are companion efforts or coordinated efforts, we're saying. They are two separate projects. So different scopes, different schedules, different engagement strategies, but there are a lot of points of coordination among the two efforts throughout the duration of the work. And the reason for coordinating these two is really to maximize our efficiencies and provide optimal clarity for the community. So with that coordination objective, we'll be doing all 14 plans at once. I had mentioned last time that we have 15 geographies, but Uptown just had the Center City action plan. That's not the vision plan, sorry, adopted. And so they don't need additional policy guidance. So we will be focusing our efforts on the 14 geographies shown up here. And the purpose of the community planning effort is to really refine the citywide guidance that you see in the comprehensive plan and the policy map at the neighborhood level and provide more specific guidance for place type designations, zoning designations, mobility needs, infrastructure needs, that sort of thing. We will be using larger geographies than previously used in our small area planning efforts. And the value of these larger geographies is severalfold as seen on the screen. Most importantly, it really facilitates conversation and collaboration among neighborhoods. So wherever you live, think about, your neighborhood and then the one close by. Issues impact you likely the same. And so if you guys can come together, talk about what you want for the future and come to a consensus, that's really what this process is going to help facilitate. Some of those conversations will likely be around major barriers like interstates or natural environmental features, things that might have previously been excluded from an area boundary because they were smaller geographies. And then these larger geographies allow us to just have more efficiency into our process and therefore expedite it. To provide neighborhood level guidance for the whole city like this has not been possible under previous structures. So here's an Sure.
So I'm just curious, and I meant to ask this last time, looking at the west side around where it's I-485, where I believe the airport and then what would be the river district, what part of the plan, like what community area would that be considered? Is that West Outer?
Yeah, the river district is in West Outer and the airport is in West Middle.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Just curious.
We will have an online map where people can put in an address and find out what geography they're in. Because at this scale, nobody knows.
Yeah. Just because of the roads, it's a little hard to read.
Sure. This slide summarizes what you can expect to find in one of the community area plans. So you'll have four major components. The first component, you have to set the stage by explaining how this plan relates to the comprehensive plan. As we saw on our previous slide, these plans support the comprehensive plan. And so it's really about describing how the vision and the plan, the comprehensive plan goals are applicable within this geography. And then acknowledging existing conditions within that geography. Each geography will have different conditions different challenges and different opportunities. So setting the table in the first part. And then we will work with the community to identify place type designations that are needed to better meet the neighborhood's goal for the future. And the zoning district changes that need to complement those place type designations. So again, that's aligning the policy with the regulation. And also in this portion of the plan, we will identify focus areas. So areas that might need additional guidance or more specificity than you would find in the comprehensive plan and the policy map. You can think of some examples might be a single family neighborhood adjacent to a large regional activity center. There's probably a need for additional design guidelines or supportive projects to ensure that those two areas grow and change compatibly rather than one overshadowing the other. After we refine place types and zoning districts, we will work with our partner agencies to recommend supporting or needed infrastructure projects. So new street connections, water sewer facilities, things that are needed to realize or to support the vision. So if a regional activity center is called for in one area, we need to have the supporting infrastructure for that development. And then there will be times where we need supporting programs as well. Maybe some affordable housing support or beautification support through housing and neighborhood services. And finally, each plan will have an implementation strategy where we talk about what's feasible in the short, middle, and long term, and how the city can help advance all the recommendations within that plan. So the expected outcome of this effort will be 14 different area plan documents. They're not envisioned to be long and lengthy. Again, we're building on the comprehensive plan. So hopefully they're lean documents that really include a series of maps or specific project recommendations. Because we're recommending changes to the policy map, once the plans are adopted, the policy map will be amended. All right. And then through this process, we expect that we'll hear some citywide changes that need to be incorporated into our future comprehensive plan updates. So we're going to hear those, keep a running list, and advance or move those forward, as appropriate after this effort. And ultimately, our partners will recommend changes to the official zoning map after our coordinated efforts. Here's an overview of how we're hoping to accomplish the work. We're doing a lot of citywide preparation and coordination right now. In January, we're going to publicly kick off the community area planning and share a lot of information about how the project's going to, proceed, how people can be involved. And then beginning in February, the last week of February, we'll have a series of spring workshops. There are 7 spring workshops. We'll take a short break over the summer just because people are traveling, and then resume those workshops in the fall. The 23 workshops will focus on the place type and zoning designations. All right, so that's where we'll talk to the community about the 2 maps, how they relate, and what changes need to be reflected on either. In 24, we'll go through a similar series of workshops, spring and fall, through all 14 geographies, but this time we'll be talking about those infrastructure projects and the supportive programs that are needed to realize the vision. And then ultimately, by the end of 24, the plan is to have 14 draft plans, 14 draft documents that will then go through a coordinated review and adoption with the zoning changes in 25. Throughout 23 and 24, we will have ongoing engagement, which we'll look at that later tonight together, and internal coordination. So this is just to show high level of how we hope to get the work done. Here's an overview of our team structure. There's a core planning team that does a lot of the analysis and draft recommendations for partners and the community to respond to. We work with interdepartmental agencies in small groups to develop recommendations, to identify issues. We also work with a larger group called the interdepartmental team to keep them tuned into what we're doing and ensure that our work doesn't conflict with their department's priorities or initiatives. So that's really trying to make sure that as an entire city, we're speaking to one another and know what's going on. And then we need the advocacy and championship of the executive leadership team, which is city manager's office and our department directors. So the next two slides are new content. I can pause here if you guys maybe thought of a question last month about the process. If you didn't, that's fine. Okay, sure. Whatever you prefer. Okay. All right. So the next two slides, like I said, they're new and intended to give you an overview of what we're thinking in terms of communications and engagement. And then we'll open the floor for discussion. So from a communications and engagement perspective, what we're really trying to accomplish in all our efforts is to be accessible, right? We want people to be able to get to us, to hear what we have to say, to understand the information. We want it to be equitable. We know that the same message does not always resonate with different stakeholders. We might need to describe something differently based on a cultural understanding or just historical need. And then we need to be inclusive. So we need, again, that's part of sort of to the equitable part, but making sure that there's an opportunity for everyone and not just the same opportunity. There's different opportunities and many opportunities. So from a communication strategy, our consultants have helped us identify our different audiences that we need to be reaching, the different messaging that we need to have prepared, and the different tactics that we'll use to disseminate this information. So high level, our audiences include a range of residences, businesses, agencies, organizations. And we have lists of those different audiences. If you guys, say, are you thinking of this group or have you thought of that group? I can get back. They're some of our frequently used lists, so we can all probably confirm that tonight here off the top of our heads, but if not, we'll look back at that. In terms of messaging, what I want to point out is that we have a message about the work we're doing and how we're going to do it. But then we also have messages tailored to our different stakeholder audiences. So what's important to a resident might be different than what's important to a business owner. And so understanding that and coming out with the right message to the right audience is something we're going to be aware of. We also, because the comprehensive plan is, the goal is to make an equitable future for all, we recognize that there are different needs throughout the community. And so if your housing, if your need is for housing or your need is for jobs or goods, there's a different message that you might want to hear. Food, I think food's here. Or if your community has been impacted by environmental issues, there are different messages that will resonate and bring people along better than if we just have one canned response.
Will transit be part of the conversation?
Yeah, so transit is, I would say it's kind of baked into the access component. You could have access to those uses by different, yes. But again, the equity part references our comprehensive plan. The transportation specifically is like a goal within the comprehensive plan. And so we're reaching a little bit higher up to the aspirational, the vision part of it. But that's a fair component or a fair thing to think about. And I think it's baked into the access. The tactics for reaching our community will, from communication, so this is different than engagement. We'll have a range of media outlets that we share with. We'll have printed materials, online materials, and then we're going to have various languages that are needed. So specifically Spanish, and in different geographies, there may be another second or the third or fourth language as needed. So this is an overview of our communication strategy. Let me share engagement, and then we can open the floor. From an engagement perspective, we also want to be equitable and inclusive. And we're organizing our work into 3 buckets of engagement. We have engagement that is constant or ongoing, so always available. This speaks to the inclusivity part of it. Doesn't matter if you're first, second, or third shift, you can always get the content that we have to share. It includes things from website to videos, newsletters, social media, story maps, community area toolkit, etc. As with all planning efforts, the work is very dependent upon the collaboration and coordination with partners. And so our engagement strategy is going to coordinate with different stakeholders, as shown in the second column. For focus groups, we're going to have, again, back to our equity metrics, stakeholders who have poor access to housing, poor access to jobs, goods, and severe environmental justice impacts. And so those are the 4 groups that we'll be talking to at different points in the project and asking them about the different place type zoning designations needed projects from their perspective. We will have those public workshops, as you saw on the slides. That's 3 workshops per geography. And there's 14 geographies. I should have done that math. That's a lot of workshops. We know that there will not be 100+ people at every workshop, but the goal for those is a Tuesday lunch, a Thursday evening, and a Saturday morning. So we want to provide a range of times for people to come, sit at a table, and talk to us. If those workshops don't work for you, we're also going to have office hours, consistently scheduled over 2 years. So if you can't get to that, give us a call. Next month, we'll help you get to the library, and you can talk to a planner. We will be accepting invitations to neighborhood meetings. We can't accept every invitation at the drop of a hat. We're going to have to put out some criteria. I think we're a staff of 15. We've already got 71 workshops over 104 weeks. And so I share this with you all because typically we say yes to every neighborhood meeting, but it's just not going to be possible this time. And so we need to be upfront about that. Here's when we're already spoken for, but here's when we're available and we're happy to meet. So that's another outlet. And then we're going to be asking for invitations to cultural events. Again, these have a set of parameters because we're just not available anytime, but events that have a large reach are occurring in areas with low participation. So we'll be tracking all of our engagement over the course of the 2 years. And if we are not hearing from a community, we are going to go out and seek an opportunity to get an audience with them. And so these cultural events are low participation, high foot traffic, a good opportunity to reach a lot of people. And then we'll be collaborating with 2 specific groups. The first, the Equity, Diversity, Inclusion Ambassadors. These are, if you were involved with the comprehensive plan, that concept of an ambassador, somebody who's working with us to share information, to recruit people to participate in our process, that's not new. But I think the ambassador group got large and people didn't feel as engaged. And so this is a chance to retailer it and ask people to serve as an ambassador if they can reach some of these underserved populations. I don't know why urban housing ministry is coming to my mind, but you're vulnerable to displacement if you have a lower annual income. And so can they help us share information with some of our more impoverished residents? That's an example of Equity, Diversity, Inclusion Ambassador. And then we will be using the Joint Use Task Force's implementation subcommittee to share information about the project, coordinate with other city departments, and receive their feedback on what we're hearing and what we're proposing. That membership includes city and county departments and a few of our private partners as well. So that's a lot of information. but I have 2 slides and I can toggle back and forth. Our question to you essentially is, what tactics are you not hearing? And what partnerships have we overlooked? So this is really a chance for us to just make sure we're reaching all the people we want to reach.
Okay. I think, I know Blumenthal has some questions. I have some questions, but before we dive into those, just out of respect for his time, Mr. Lucaria. Commissioner Blumenthal had a question, a more broad question, nothing specific to any mandatory referral. And then on a broader basis, I think that was February or March that you were before the Planning Commission. And we promised you a part 2 this year, and this is a good reminder. There seems to be some kind of strategy here as we're looking at the bulk of these. So maybe it's time for a revisit, my friend.
Absolutely, and thank you.
Mr. Blumenthal, please.
Yeah, thanks. And it's a good question. It's not specific to any mandatory referral. You see a lot of the city properties are sold subject to an upset bid process. Is that the same process for CMS properties? For example,
That's a great question. First, let me apologize. The superintendent called, so that was the reason I stepped out. So I apologize. That one I had to take. So yes, the statutes relative to disposition process for cities and counties are the ones that are referenced for boards of education. There are further limiting factors on boards of education and the transfer of real estate for boards. So because school boards can only buy basically for school purposes, can't be in real estate speculation, because cities and counties can do housing authorities and parking authorities and airport authorities, and school boards can't constitutionally. So there are some other school boards have to transact at fair market value per the statutes relative to, which is why folks say, well, how come you don't just give surplus school property to affordable housing developers for free? And the answer is because I don't look good in orange. So we have to abide by those things. But when it comes down to it, so as long as we're checking the boxes that it's an arm's length transaction, we have the opportunity, intergovernmental transfer. So at any time, the city or the county could call CMS and say, we'd like to buy X, and we could say, yes, we'll work that out. Or we'd like to rent X from you. Yes, we can work that out. So that's a thing. The historic preservation covenants, which are covering a couple of those transactions, whereby the buyer is agreeing to, honor some historic preservation piece in perpetuity. They're therefore paying slightly less than fair market value because they're not buying 100% of the development rights. So it's fair market value of the development rights that are left over, with the idea being that if they don't do what they're supposed to do, that property comes back to the Board of Education. And then finally, exchange, which somebody says we have A for B, and then the upset bid process. And so that follows the same for the city, the county, and the Board of Education for that upset bid process.
Got it. And then by the time we see it, have all of the other kind of government organizations had the chance to say, we don't need this?
Yes. So the first step in this mandatory referral process is that we go to Joint Use Task Force, which was referenced earlier, where all those entities are, and say, we're buying, we're selling. And that's something we all do. Leasing out. Does anybody have that need? So that's the first step. It gets through that before it gets to you. And then the next step is then to go see our partners in Mecklenburg County, because they have a statutory right of first refusal on any of the properties that we ultimately convey.
That answered my question. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I have a question too.
Yes.
So I looked on the leased properties, it looked like there was already a purpose or a designated person, a lessor already available for those. But for the sale properties, did you have any?
So with the sales,
Yeah.
basically the two where we have a historic designation, those are defined, because as long as they do what they're supposed to do, we will know who winds up with them. With the upset bid, we have basically the initiator, and then we won't know the resolution until we're through that upset bid process. But we basically know what we're starting with and at what amount.
Oh, well, one more thing about that. So how long does the process take? Because it seemed like you were disposing of some of the properties to eliminate the maintenance. But if you're going to maintain it for 5 years during a sale process,
Well, we hope the sale process doesn't take 5 years by any stretch of the imagination. The idea being hopefully, we get through and we get these posted, and then it typically there's the way the process lines out. The first call is to the person we're initiating for. They make their deposit. We advertise there's 10 days for somebody to upset bid that. If that's upset bid, then 10 days, and the clock keeps resetting until everybody taps out and we have a final offer. So hopefully it'll go a little faster than that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so very much.
Thank you. And thank you.
We'll
I
connect a little
appreciate it. I
later.
Apologize. Thanks.
Okay, so switching back, thank you guys for the interruption and the redirect there, but switching back to Catherine's presentation, as we hash out some of the questions, as we've had a chance to digest some of this information, I will go to Commissioner Blumenthal next, and if you could raise your hand to be recognized after Blumenthal.
Yeah, a couple of questions kind of in the order that you went through the presentation. The first one, we talked about, how the 14 plans are going to be larger than kind of any particular neighborhood and larger than the small area plans in the past. When it comes, I'm assuming a lot of the feedback is going to come from neighborhood associations, especially some of the more organized. Is their feedback going to be kind of restricted to their purview? Or are they going to be able to provide feedback on the whole area? Kind of like because like NODA would be like a land grab, they're going to comment on everything in the whole area. I just know they will. So is their feedback going to be restricted to kind of that specific neighborhood or the broader area?
They're
That makes
invited
sense.
they're invited to provide feedback about the entire geography.
Okay, even
Oh.
as a neighborhood association, not as an individual.
I think but no one voice is more important than another.
Right. But just curious. Next, as it comes to some of the rezonings that we'll inevitably be seeing after June 1st of next year, these community area plans won't be done yet. Is there going to be any kind of credence to draft community area plans as it relates to a potential rezoning? Or is that going to have to wait till final adoption? Just because there'll be, a year and a half in theory, right?
Yeah. I think traditionally you can say the draft plan suggests this, but it can't be part of your decision.
Okay.
So I think one thing, remember that 24 policy map incorporated all those previous plans and updated all the lanes recommendations. Plus provide design guides, transportation, open space, a lot of other things. So it's lanes plus. So that is being used now to provide guidance. In addition to some other, like playbooks, books, or other strategic plans. So what it does is it provides a foundation, even foundation for everyone. It provides a level foundation for everyone in the community in terms of updated policy. The plans will not be effective until adoption. It'll just get confusing because will be depending on where we are in the process. So I guess it's safe to say that the policy map will be used for guidance, and then the new plans won't be used until the plans are adopted by council.
No, and that's helpful. I think that kind of dovetails into my next question too, which is just to use a specific neighborhood that I kind of appreciated their plan was the Belmont neighborhood. And one thing that they had done is they had identified specific buildings that they wanted preserved. And then, both the zoning committee and staff took that largely into consideration when looking at rezonings if it happened to involve one of those properties, right? So, I guess the first part of that is, would that be then, we talked about focus areas. Is that where something like that would come in?
Yeah, focus area could be used for design and preservation need, or there could be a design and preservation focus area.
Mhm.
We have neighborhood protecting our charm and identity as a comprehensive plan goal. So at a neighborhood level, if that translates to recommending preservation of certain sites, that's a reasonable expectation for a plan.
So during that kind of the interim, right, pre-community plan adoption, you could lean on charm and identity as a part of the comprehensive plan as your argument to save something, even if it's not yet in a formally adopted plan.
And I also want to say that because a site's recommended for preservation in a plan, that's not legally
Right.
binding.
Right. No, understood, believe me.
Yeah, but
believe
yes.
me.
um,
And then-
Before we move on, one thing to add too, Catherine, is that through this process, once the UDO becomes adopted, there are certain overlay districts that as the community area planning process becomes more developed and we start to have those conversations about identity and charm, we'll look where those overlay districts might be applied. So to start to integrate the UDO into the process and make it real for people to think about their options for how to preserve, not just identifying on the map, but how might we use a new regulatory tool that helps us preserve our identity and charm, consistent with the goals in the comp plan.
If those overlay districts aren't in the initial community area plan in 25, could it be added later as well? So these will be quote living documents like everything else we're working on, right? Okay. And then my last question was just as you start reaching out to the community and having all of the outreach, however many different meetings and ways that you're going to touch people, that's going to be. Is there going to be a first draft kind of that they comment on? Or is it just going to be open season for comments and then that gets incorporated into a first draft?
We will not have a first draft of everything. We will, once we start the workshops, we'll have something for them to respond to related to the first topic, for example, place types and zoning. But it's not like we have a first draft for everything. It's kind of as we move through the process, we'll have some recommendations or some drafts for them to respond to as we go through each engagement phase.
I think that'll be helpful, right? Just because you don't want people could comment on, in theory, anything and the relevancy might be questionable.
Well, we have to keep pointing back to that. This is all building on the engagement from the comprehensive plan and the policy map. So we have heard a lot over the last few years, and yeah, it's all cumulative. And
Okay. And then the last small, then I might have missed this. How many drafts do you anticipate prior to adoption?
we will have one draft by the
Just
end
curious.
of 24.
Because it's going to be more than one.
So
Sorry.
2 years for plan development is very aggressive for 14 geographies.
Mhm.
So we're committing to plan development in 2 years. Review and adoption may take longer.
Okay.
And
Alright.
if review and adoption requires additional drafts, that's something we'd have to cross when we come to it.
Cool. That's it for me. Thanks, guys. Okay.
Commissioner Lansdale, please.
Mine really deals with the first plan that's already done. Can you describe a little bit about how you're going to manage the municipal service district's role in this process? I have a specific, for instance, is when Center City Partners were doing their plan, it was difficult to provide input in the process. It was difficult to align the plan's policy suggestions and framework with the UDO that was happening at the same time. So it's a two-part question. How are you going to manage the MSDs across the city? And how are you going to deal with the conflict that arises in policy and regulation with the UDO?
So I think I'll answer the first part and ask for support on the second. The MSDs are one stakeholder in the interdepartmental coordination. So each carries their own voice and input. We're looking to work together. And so University City will be at the table. I think South Park is developing an MSD, they'll be at the table. And hopefully those two won't have similar or the same issues maybe as Center City because they're not as far ahead of us. But I'll turn it over to Alicia for that second part.
One of the project names on the city plan, Kathy was actually on the plan development team. And it was difficult because one, almost all of the process was independent. So engagement and their staff availability was a little bit different than ours. So they didn't have the city as an organization 5,000+ people working here to say, hey, we need your
hey, we need your help. So it was a little bit different. Engagement was difficult. In terms of integration and coordination of the MSD work, Center City's work, if UCP or University City Partners had their plan adopted, we would just point to those as part of this process, or integrate their recommendations in the process. So that's why we have 14 geographies that we're updating. Center City is its own, and so we're honoring that plan. One, because their place types recommendations align with their goals and objectives in the plan, and their recommendations for the UDO proposed districts to implement the place type, they align. And so we'll continue to have a similar conversation with South Park, University City Partners. They'll be integrated into the work and make sure that both the policy and the regulations align with the goals that they outline for their particular MSD. In terms of when conflicts arise with the policy and the regulations during the process, Catherine, I don't know if you mentioned it, but the UDO implementation team will be their companion project. So we'll be at the table together resolving how those conflicts, how to mitigate or eliminate those types of conflicts when they occur. But the goal is to make sure it's easy for people to see what the vision is, here's what we expect to see, and then align the tool to implement it as much as we can. And in some cases, we may have to create it. So I hate to say that Laura's gonna kill me, but we might have to in some instances. I don't know. It'll have to be a really compelling case. I'm saying that so Laura won't kill me.
Thank you, Commissioner Lansdale, and we have Sealy.
I don't really have comments per se, but I've done a decent amount of outreach to partners that I have and friends I have. I know Camp North End would love to hold kind of a summit. I'm on the neighborhood development board of NODA, so I happily would host something as well. Talk to the Montfort Neighborhood Association. They also would be interested. They are interested in having something November 5th. Obviously, that's not happening in this. And I talked to Megan Littlegood about having a table when they do Camden Commons next spring. So any help that I can give you guys or any suggestions, community engagement happens to be, and social media happen to be my specialties. So happy to provide whatever help I can give. And I have 22,000 followers on Instagram, so I can post anything you ever need.
That's awesome. Yes, please. We see the ambassadors, the commissioners as potentially one of the ambassadors. Yes, commissioners as one of our ambassadors. And so that seems like a perfect example of the brooch that, or the people you can help us reach. Thank you.
Anybody else? So Alicia and I have kind of broached the topic on how to be the most efficient and effective partner for staff in the community engagement process. What I quickly realized, due to the many emails that I've already received from commissioners and community partners, is that this has to be so carefully coordinated. We have to walk to the same beat and drum as staff. We have to read from the same book and be in the same chapter as staff. I will offer that, to Catherine's comment, staff can't be everywhere or at receive every invite. And in places where you guys might deem it appropriate, and a community meeting you may not be able to commit to. And again, if you deem it appropriate, please pass it along to us. And we'll see how we can kind of take up the slack, because you guys need clones. I've said that since the beginning of community engagement for the comp plan. So that's my first comment. I don't remember seeing Community Relations Committee specifically named in the engagement strategy or one of the partners for disseminating communications. Is that a resource that we may be able to use? Because their reach is kind of broad and very ambiguous sometimes. One thing or 1 month they may be focusing on this effort, the next month they may be focusing on a different effort, but it all seems to, the goal obviously is to make sure people are informed and engaged. So the Community Relations Committee, is that a resource that we have considered?
I say I'm drawing a blank on that.
Hadn't you mentioned that you guys have worked with them or that community relations?
Because their focus is a little bit more on. But we can absolutely reach out and see what we. Yeah, we talked about it.
I mean, someone on our team met with them recently and learned that they do a lot of conflict resolution. Like when there's fights at schools, they're involved in that. And so what we talked about, because they're in the same building as Housing and Neighborhood Service, we approach it like the same department, but it's kind of not, that they would help us to be neighborhood liaisons. There's a big part of this where we lean on the people that are more boots on the ground every month, kind of every day. And so we can leverage their, like those neighborhood meetings, kind of leverage their presence by equipping them with information about this process. So that's one way we've thought about it. So I'm trying to figure out who it was. We just had it last week, that conversation last week,
Okay.
and they told us about it.
It was just a thought.
That's a
Yes,
good
that's
point.
one of their avenues they kind of specialize in, but they have many. Request, not necessarily a comment, but a request. If you could go back to the map that shows the geographic areas. This map, may I request that we have 2 overlays separately? One that shows BOCC alignment, Board of County Commissioner by district, and then one that shows county council. I'm sorry, city council. Thank you. So as we,
But then we get to the print. This map is truly, it was used during the conference process, like, people probably didn't recognize it, but those lines show a lot of the parts of the process when we talk about analysis and where we've been engaged, and the 2020 policy map process. So it looks very illustrative because it kind of is. And once we start the process, we will be able to zoom in to the partial, the neighborhood, and then access a lot of other data points. We can make sure that those two are.
yeah, not for like distribution or anything, but just so as we're coordinating some of these engagement sessions and partnering with, hey, city council, we've already received an invitation to for District 4, Board of County Commission. So what geographic area of this map does that entail? Because it goes literally from uptown all the way out east.
Yeah, with I think of District 1, Dante, she would have part of South Inner, Uptown, part of Northeast Inner, part of East Inner, but only parts. So that would be interesting.
So I think this is just more information for us to continue to absorb and again, strategize and add various layers of definition to how we will partner with staff in pushing forth this initiative. Any other questions for Catherine?
Just one more quick thing. Are the other Mecklenburg County municipalities doing anything in conjunction with this?
They are informed in our process through the implementation subcommittee.
Okay. And then I should know the answer to this, but between the southwest outer and the south outer, that little gray area, that's just unincorporated?
No, that's Pineville.
Oh, it's Pineville.
It's outside of city limits.
But,
We are planning for our appropriate.
gotcha. Oh, that's what I thought. All right, cool. Thank you.
Is it possible, like day of, to get this presentation just so that we can have it, if we have a screen, have it on our screens? Because like there's a lot of things I would love to thumb through, but I'm not gonna have you go through them all.
We can send it out. Yeah.
Yeah.
I can send it out in follow-up email. Yeah, sometimes we're working on the presentations until like the last possible moment, but in the cases that we have, we can certainly share them.
That is highly relatable.
Thank you, Catherine and Alicia. So our next item on the agenda, our last item on the agenda, I think. So we saw Dr. Robin just a short few days ago in her presentation to the full commission. She mentioned possibly using or the plan to utilize the planning committee as part of the implementation for or as part of as an implementation subcommittee. And I asked her to visit with us tonight to kind of explain how that is different from the role that we already play, and just to add some additional context to the presentation that she gave us at full commission. So Dr. Byers.
It's okay. You
Please.
can call me Dr. Robin. That's fine. And first, just want to apologize because I'll be honest, I completely forgot that you guys swapped places with the zoning committee. So the previous planning committee has heard this before. And I think the planning commission heard this once way back when maybe last summer, like not this past summer, but before. Yeah, essentially. A few gray hairs ago. And so we'll go through again, implementation, what the committees are, and then just have discussion and feedback, but I plan to make this pretty quick today. Specifically, committee support from the comp plan. Throughout the comp plan process, they created two committees. One is called NEST, Neighborhood Equity and Stabilization. And then we have the Equitable Development Commission as well. What was recommended in the plan and is part of the implementation strategy is the Community Benefits Task Force, which you may have heard of. I don't know if some of the new people, you guys may not have heard it yet, but you will. And then an implementation committee. And so in the implementation strategy, it talks about this implementation committee being both staff and public facing. And what tends to happen is if we get too many people in the room, we don't get a lot of things done. We end up just circling the wagons a little bit. And so what we're going to do is kind of repurpose two committees that we already have. The one being the public facing, we would planning committee, because you guys would see those things anyway. And then we've added an implementation subcommittee to our joint use task force. That's going to be the staff facing piece of that. And related to some of the other questions, we do have county members on there. We do the meetings together. I'll just say this quick: joint use task force and implementation subcommittee. We'll have joint use task force meet on mandatory referrals and then jump into the implementation subcommittee. And so even some of the town members, Pineville, Matthews, they'll be in the first half of that meeting, and some of them stick around just to hear what we're doing. So it's not a shock. So specifically for you guys, the charge, if you will, to be formal about it, is to review our annual report and our dashboard. And so we will come to you guys in late spring and summer yearly to show you the draft of the annual report. and then any changes we're making to the dashboard. A lot of the changes for the dashboard you'll see are added data and how we're reconfiguring things. Depending on software updates. As you know, software updates, I think every single year. And so everything looks just slightly different. So we'll bring that back to you guys to review and receive your feedback before we publish that out. Again, this is something that we would come to you guys for anyway. But this is how we're tackling that whole implementation committee from the comp plan. And so our next steps, after the planning commission meeting last Monday, a couple commissioners had told me they wanted to geek out on data. So at some point in the winter or spring, if you guys would like that, we can offer deep dive meeting sessions to really dig into a lot of the data in the dashboard. And that's as needed. So we will let you specifically, Chairman Samuel, let us know when you would like us to provide that for you. And then spring and summer, expect to see another draft of the annual report and the dashboard. And we can do a demo if needed. And then late summer, we'll publish fiscal year 23's annual report and then update the dashboard. And so with that, are there any questions or comments?
I think you've answered. It was a very soft inquiry, and I just wanted to make sure that there was nothing additional beyond the already existing charge of the planning committee. That's number one. And then number two, just to offer, and I have not verified this, but some visitors to the implementation dashboard have expressed some difficulty accessing it through a mobile device. And I just wanted to offer that. There's a lot of data there.
There's a lot of data, and we've actually found that. And so I'm going to try and make this brief because I can get really long-winded about it. We had a couple different software options that we looked into at the beginning. In order to offer the functionality we really needed on a laptop, the way it configured the data bogs down a cell phone. That being said, we found a way to get cell phones working. It's just going to take us this next year to figure out. So by the time the next round of the dashboard updates, it will work on a mobile phone. That being said, just a little plug, it is a lot and it is for the whole city. So I would suggest using a bigger screen anyway. We need that big screen to
I
really
have
see what's
not
going on.
attempted to do that from a mobile device, which is why I could not verify that comment, but
But we are aware of that issue and we're trying to accommodate that.
good. And I'll just then, I don't even know who this request might be fulfilled by, but if there is a message or disclaimer for those using a mobile device, if they log onto the dashboard that tells them, close your phone, use a laptop.
A diplomatic way to say that.
Yes, of course.
We'll have to add that. Gretchen, just so you guys are aware, Gretchen's really leading the charge on the dashboard. And she's done a phenomenal job with that. So we'll see what we can do.
Thank you, Gretchen. Any questions for Dr. Byers?
I answered anything, really.
Nothing? Okay. Well, with that, I will consider this a very nice and concise meeting. Thank you, Catherine and Alicia and Mr. Lucaria and Dr. Robin. If there is nothing else for the good of the order, I'll accept a motion to adjourn.
Motion Blumenthal.
Motion by Blumenthal,
Second.
second by Neely. All in favor? Of course we are. Meeting adjourned. Thank you and good evening.
Yeah, dinner.